Welcome to the Physician Pharmacist YouTube channel, and today we're going to be talking about my AMCAS application, and I'm going to reveal all of the different intricacies, what my MCAT score was, what my GPA was, all of my experiences, as well as some details about my personal statement. So hopefully you guys can take away some of the recommendations that I think you should employ when trying to get into medical school. Alrighty, and if you're new to the channel, my name is Nathan Gartland, and I am a physician and pharmacist, and I've created this channel to help non-traditional applicants get into medical school. I'm happy to announce that we're at 75,000 views, and it's one of those big achievements that I wasn't even sure I would even get there in the first place. This YouTube business is pretty hard to get involved in, and it's been really fun, and I can't thank all of you for the support over the years. So without further ado, let's get into some of the AMCAS details related to my application. We got to talk about the big numbers, the MCAT and GPA, and we'll talk a little bit specifically about the science GPA or also known as the BCPM GPA. Of course, if you're applying to medical school, the admissions committee actually values your science GPA a little bit more than obviously getting a 4.0 in something that's unrelated to the field of medicine, which makes sense logistically speaking. So let's kick things off with the first part of this application, and we're going to talk about my MCAT. And for those of you who aren't familiar with me, I ended up taking the MCAT twice. So my first MCAT, I kind of got my feet wet, was interested in exploring the field of medicine, and didn't really take it seriously. And there needs to be a whole nother video on how to study for the MCAT specifically. But long story short, I got a 497. And that is pretty bad. At the time was equivalent to the 37th percentile. So yeah, I was a little frustrated. So I ended up taking the MCAT a second time. That score was a 510. I know that the trends have now increased, but at the time that was actually the national average to get in. Nowadays it's more like 513 approximately for at least MD acceptances. I was beside myself. I was so excited because I could actually apply to medical school with that score. And so moving on to the GPA. So my official overall GPA was a 378. And so certainly right above average there, but not substantially higher. But what actually made me stand out even more was my science GPA, and that was a 391. So that definitely was another factor that I think helped boost my application a little bit further, considering that my MCAT was kind of at the average, maybe even one point below. And so that was another kind of balancing act that kind of boosted me up a little bit more. Now we're talking through the AMCAS, and we can go through some of the experiences that I had and what I listed. And I think as a application reviewer, it's really nice to see variety of experiences. And so my first experience that I ended up listing was a rotation that I had done. And at the time, I was still in pharmacy school. I had only finished one API by the time I actually clicked submit on my application. And so this API rotation was an internal med rotation. And I talked a lot about what that was like, actually having to care for patients and kind of dosing their vancomycin and doing some of the clinical work that pharmacy students get to do. And I thought that that was a really cool experience to share with the physicians because, of course, when I was applying to medical school, they are very familiar with that and they understood the roles that pharmacists had, and I could speak on actually doing those clinical things. Another feature was my physician shadowing experience, and this is something I really harp on the channel that you need to get, especially as a non-traditional and someone who's transitioning from pharmacy into medicine. I think it's really important to make sure that you demonstrate that you actually want to pursue medicine. So two of my listed experiences were physician shadowing. One of them was a chronic pain, so I kind of tied in the pharmacy perspective. I did some literature review, and I also commented, I made this one of my most meaningful experiences. So in total, I only had about 55, 60 hours of physician shadowing, and I think I was under the average for sure. But if you can get at least 100 hours, that would be my general recommendation. My fourth experience was clinical research, and I kind of split up my research, like I was mentioning earlier, into clinical and experimental, and then a publication. And so I thought that was kind of a unique way to demonstrate the different research projects that I had done or contributed on. And it also kind of took a different perspective from research as a whole. They all weren't just retrospective chart reviews. Some of them were bench work, some of them were experimental. And I think that was a unique way to kind of showcase the research. And so a lot of questions actually came when I was interviewing about my research, and that'll be a common theme too, depending on which programs that you interview at. Another experience of mine was actually my pharmacy intern hours, and I had worked in a hospital. I had very, very little experience like actually working in a community pharmacy. I was a technician at one point, and that was almost prior to starting pharmacy school, so it wasn't really relevant for me to add. But I had close to 1,000 hours of pharmacy intern work, so I definitely showcased that a little bit, and that was one of my beefier hour commitments on the application. I understood the workflow, how pharmacy verifies medications and brings them up to the floors. So I kind of had the inner workings and behind the scenes perspective. So that was a cool one to share about and talk about on interviews. Another experience was my pharmacy leadership. I was a leader in a professional pharmacy fraternity. And so I was the president for that organization and vice president. And we did a bunch of various community service event activities. I didn't have a ton of questions related to that particular leadership opportunity. I talked a little bit about my Haiti global health trip, and in my previous videos and in my book, I talk a lot about how this was really, really instrumental to my decision making of even pursuing medicine in the first place. And so this was obviously one of my most meaningful experiences, and it really helped define why medicine for me. I had another leadership experience. This was the Phi Lambda Sigma Leadership Society in pharmacy school, and so I talked a little bit about my roles in that particular organization. Another experience was another volunteer opportunity where we did some public health outreach to the local community. And then lastly, I also did a little fun tidbit section where I just talked about my non-traditional piano playing. I've learned a whole bunch of songs, and it's been something that I thought was really cool. And fast forwarding into the future, I ended up using that for my personal statement for anesthesiology. Alrighty, and now talking about the personal statement specific to medical school. And to be honest, looking back at the personal statement for this video and to create it, oh my goodness, it is bad.
Are you sure about that?
Having the perspective that I do now, especially as an application reader, I thought it was top notch at the time, but it's complete crap. I think I made a lot of the same mistakes that I've been actively preaching to avoid. Maybe that's why I'm so vigilant about it nowadays. I kind of introduced my essay as having the classic sick family member.
No, God, please, no, no, no.
However, did not articulate myself in the most coherent way possible. And I basically regurgitated my entire work activities section, but just in written form. And so I think that was definitely a weaker part of my application, looking back at it now. When it comes to applications, a lot of people will read the personal statement first before they even look at any of your activities and experiences. So kind of getting a lot of that information across in the personal statement can be important. So wrapping it all up, what were the outcomes of this application? And so I ended up applying to 34 programs. And so out of those 34 programs, 6 of them were osteopathic programs and 28 of them were MD. I ended up getting 3 osteopathic interviews. And these were actually LECOM, New York Institute of Technology, NYIT, Nova Southeastern, which is down in Florida, and then 4 MD programs. And this was the West Virginia University, University of Buffalo, which is my alma mater, University of Rochester, and Marshall University. And so ultimately I ended up going to University of Buffalo, and I'm obviously very happy about that decision. There were a lot of benefits at the time that made sense to go there. But anyways, that is a wrap on my application, just kind of going through what it took for me to get into medical school. And so if you have any further questions about the application process as a whole, feel free to comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help a lot, and I appreciate it. Have a great day, guys.